Hi, welcome to participants of the BERA Annual Conference 2021. I'd like to welcome you to a really brief presentation on a project that colleagues at the University of Exeter and beyond have been working on called the Cultural Community Mentoring Programme. This presentation is going to be about 15 minutes long, and in it I hope to give a brief overview of some of the work that we've been engaged in over the last year or so, which is a professional mentoring framework, which is directly informed by anti-racist and social justice pedagogies. I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Malcolm Richards, and I'm a doctoral researcher at the Graduate School of Education at the University of Exeter. The project has been co-facilitated and co-run by colleagues Dr. Sana Rizvi, who is a lecturer in education at the Graduate School of Education, and Helen Knowler, who's an honorary lecturer at the Graduate School of Education also. So our context is really, in many ways, really straightforward and not unknown. And there's been significant amounts of research which speaks specifically to the reality that our classrooms, certainly within the United Kingdom's context, have become increasingly diverse. Whereas our teachers, our educators, whether that is classroom teachers, senior leaders, senior management, or even governance, are predominantly racialized as white. We're using the term BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, throughout this project. But our students often experience issues of cultural deficit theorizing in university and in schools. In the post-Black Lives Matters era of June 2020, there are a whole myths of post-racial society, race-neutral and colorblind approaches in meritocracy have been fundamentally challenged. And there has become a growing understanding by many that these themes and approaches continue to be raised the needs and concerns of many BIPOC mentees, mentors, and educators. There are libraries full of research on BIPOC participants in teacher education, whether it relates to recruitment progress, progression, retention. And I've quoted just a small sample of some of those themes. It's really important to note at this point that though I've already referenced post-BLM, it's really clear that this research connects with a long and well-established history, generational history of research that speaks to the themes that the project seeks to uncover. What's really important to note here is, and certainly within the context of the project that we've developed, BIPOC teacher education trainees are less likely to complete their courses. They're more likely to be requested to complete extensions of their schooling experiences, and they're less likely to receive appropriate support from their mentors. This is a well-established reality, and one which we were really keen to engage with. So in teacher education and development, mentorship is a really crucial part of the success of trainees of newly qualified and recently qualified teachers. The role of mentors in formal education is formally set, and mentors support, advise, and assess teacher training practices. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that students, NQTs and RQTs experience issues in their training due to inappropriate mentoring. This can often force mentees to leave their training or teaching roles if there's a breakdown in their relationship. And again, there is significant amount of research that speaks to this, as well as speaking to the retention rates of BIPOC educators within our schooling system. Poor experiences are compounded as trainees, NQTs and RQTs. And many feel that in the case of mentoring relationship breakdown, whether it's within the university or in school, institutions are almost certainly going to side with the school mentor, rendering the voice of the BIPOC mentee unheard. Cultural Community Mentoring Programme sought to kind of begin to engage with some of these themes. Our aims are relatively simple. We wanted to implement a voluntary pilot mentoring scheme for a small group of BIPOC teacher trainees, NQTs and RQTs during 2021. Our mentees what we wanted to do was pair our mentees and who would be working with experienced BIPOC teachers who have significant experience working in schools across the United Kingdom. CCMP is a small scale participatory action-based research project. We framed it through 5 mentoring sessions, which were virtual due to the challenges of COVID, distance, and funding over the course of the academic year. What was really important to us was to provide a nurturing and safe space for BIPOC participants to talk about their experiences related to training, assessment, curriculum, and career guidance that BIPOC participants experience at different intersections of their careers. And it's really, really important to kind of begin to hone in on that final aim. It was what we sought to do was really create and develop a nurturing and safe space for BIPOC participants to speak about their experiences. Our guiding principle was that our participants have full control of their stories, and that control remains with them. And that unless there was a safeguarding issue, all members of the team, whether that's mentors, mentees, and researchers, would respect the autonomy of the mentee. We received ethical approval from the University of Exeter for our project. And the topics for discussion in our project were broad and rooted in education, but also include issues around race, inequalities, racism, and may include exploring unsettling and traumatic experiences or incidents that relate to education more widely, or the experiences of our trainees. In seeking to safeguard and provide the appropriate support and guidance for all of our participants, we were very conscious of ensuring that participants had access to members of the research team. They were provided with signposting and resources to seek further support. And there was direct engagement with some of the more formal structures of teacher training within some of our institutions. We also sought as a project team to follow up on reports of racism, which were part of the ongoing dialogues that kind of informed the process. But once again, we were really, really clear that our guiding principle is that our participants remain in full control of their own story. The design of the project was relatively straightforward. Each mentor would work alongside 2 mentees, and they would agree to meet their mentees 5 times over the academic year. As part of the project, the research team developed a professional mentoring framework that located critical discourses around race, anti-racism, and social justice centrally. I'm sure that within the context of the last academic year, many of us who have been either participants, directly engaged, or observers of some of these discourses can see that there's been, in many ways, a significant shift in the way in which our educational spaces begin to engage with some of these critical discourses. And that can produce some real tension, and that can introduce some different points of view and perspectives. And so the dialogue that was framed within those 5 sessions was really, really important. As I mentioned before, sessions were facilitated using voice over IP technology, so they were remote. Sessions were scheduled to last for an hour. And in our sessions, using our framework, participants were offered space where they could critically reflect, share knowledge, and understand better how they navigate predominantly white educational spaces. Our mentors had significant experience working across a variety of racially diverse settings. Our participants were asked to use the provided stimuli as part of that mentoring framework that I've already alluded to, that looks at the role of race and other social justice issues to guide their dialogues. However, the lived experience of the participants remains central. Following each session, mentors and mentees were asked to write very brief reflections of their mentoring experiences. In instances where they were unable to write, we also asked our mentors and mentees to record reflections. This was a choice. Once again, the stories and the experiences of mentor and mentees are theirs. And so if mentors and mentees didn't choose to write their reflections, that was okay. That didn't preclude them from their engagement with the program. This, of course, raises a whole range of challenges, some of which I'll allude to a little bit later. At the heart of our research methodology, in many ways, was the principles of participatory action research. And this is a well-known and widely used research methodology. And fundamentally, at its heart is this desire to understand and improve the world by changing it. we sought to include collective, self-reflective inquiry, which we as researchers and our participants undertake, so that we could all engage and improve upon the practices in which we participate and the situations we find ourselves. And in this instance, we're talking about within education, and specifically within the space of teaching, education and development. As has been alluded to, PAR draws upon the paradigms of critical theories, constructivism, and can use a whole range of qualitative and quantitative methods. Understanding the tensions of power dynamics within the teacher education and development setting was a really crucial underpinning to our project. And empowerment was a really important part of the outcomes that we wanted to facilitate dialogue around. Our reflective processes were linked, as per PAR, to action, linked to history's, culture and local context, and embedded in the relationships that are formed by mentor and mentee within the space that has been provided. This draws upon much work, but in particular the works of Paulo Freire and so many others. And as has already been said, that an important part of the methodology was seeking to improve the world by changing it, but also empowering participants to own their stories and have full control of them. As was alluded in the previous slide, this was a small scale project. So we had two mentors and 4 mentees. And the slide on screen at the moment gives an indication of some of the dynamics. We've of course tried to put as little information about our participants as possible to protect their anonymity. Our mentors were highly experienced, and our mentees were at differing points in their career, ranging from IT student all the way to recently qualified. I've made reference to the professional framework that had been developed, and part of that framework included key documents for both mentor and mentee for each session. There was also an introduction guide, session resource pack and session reflection packs, as well as regular checkpoints throughout the program for mentor and or mentee to connect with the research group. In addition to that, regular communication was made with all participants throughout. This became a really important part of the program, the openness of the kind of connections that participants were able to make, whether that was via email, whether that was using facilities like WhatsApp, or through regular scheduled sessions. In terms of the overview of the project, those 5 sessions ran between November and June. So November 2020 and June 2021. And there were a number of themes that were kind of touched upon in each session. Example questions for session 1, for example, would have been, what are the tensions of working in a predominantly white space as a BIPOC teacher? In session 3, we asked the question, is there a disjunction between what counts as professional behavior and aspects of your racialized and cultural self? What's really important about the themes and the questions is that they were rooted in the pedagogical practices of being a teacher, but they also spoke to the experience, asking questions about the experience of BIPOC teachers within our UK or English education setting. So our next steps, hopefully in this very brief outline presentation, we've been able to give you just an overview of kind of what this program is all about. We've got to continue our data analysis in preparation for a final report for this project. It's really important to note that the project was funded by the Exeter Education Incubator, which offered us a small amount of money to engage in some research in a particular part of education that we felt was important, and we give thanks for their support in that. And one of the outcomes that we have to develop is a report. As I've just alluded to, we've engaged with some reflective discussions with our participants, and that's been a really important part of beginning to understand the outputs and impacts of the program from the perspective of the participants, and we will continue in doing that.